All right, good evening. Sorry I'm a couple minutes late here. We'll go ahead and dive right in. So I have one and a half agenda items that I wanted to cover tonight. The first one has to do with some reports that we've been getting about the OM5PAC radio and teams having intermittent connection potentially to devices on the second port of that radio. So tomorrow's team update is going to mention this potential issue. It's going to revise the rule, I believe it's R63, that requires the RoboRio connection directly to the port adjacent to the power connector, the 18 to 24 volt PoE labeled port. And what it's going to do is allow them to put a switch potentially between the RoboRio and that port if the team chooses. So teams using the OM5PAC, if they are seeing an issue with connection to secondary devices, coprocessors, cameras, whatever, and they have a switch on their robot, this would allow them to connect the RoboRio to the switch where those other devices are connected, and then connect from that switch into the radio, and that may allow those devices to connect more reliably. The OM5PAN does not have this same issue, so that's another potential solution for teams that may be experiencing the reports I've heard, and based on a similar issue that we thought we had stamped out, but apparently not, that we saw during testing of the OM5PAC. It's generally an intermittent type issue, and power cycling the radio is what gives you that next roll of the dice, I guess I'll describe it, in the intermittence. So heads up for that coming out in the team update, and something to be aware of as a troubleshooting step for teams that you may be working with that are trying to get an IP camera or coprocessor, Ethernet connected coprocessor working if they're seeing issues with it connecting through that second port of the OM5PAC. The other thing I wanted to cover, and I am working on getting the code up right now in LabVIEW, and as soon as I do, I will share my screen over so you can see what I am describing. But I just wanted to touch again on the USB camera LabVIEW situation. So the team update last week announced that there was a LabVIEW update version 17.2 that had some of the fixes in there, the same fixes that were in the hotfix that was posted on Schoology were in that update to improve the reliability of USB camera streaming from RoboRio, running LabVIEW to the LabVIEW dashboard. All right, we can go ahead and show the screen here. So there were a couple of things I wanted to touch on. I got a number of questions this week about how to tell if somebody has the update installed. In terms of telling from what we care about, which is the USB camera, the most reliable thing is going to be to go see if the fixes are in the camera VIs, which I'll show in a second. But going here to help, and then about First Robotics Competition software, this will show my version. So I have the 2017.2.0 update installed. The version of the driver station that's included in this update is the same version of the driver station that was in update 2017.1.0, and that is 17.0.1. That's the version required by the rules. So really the only reason teams would need to update to this update is if they're using LabVIEW with a USB camera. This window apparently wants to hide down behind Go to Webinar. There we go. All right, so in a robot main project with the template, there should be this send to PC loop here. This is where the updates were made. So if we show the block diagram there, so if the team doesn't have the update, you won't see this case statement here that's checking for localhost or localhost.local domain and grabbing a new name, continuing to go look for the name if it's those values, updating the value each loop through. So this case statement is the big thing that's in the update on the robot code side. Based on what I heard from Greg McCaskill at NI, who was testing these fixes at Hub City event last week, was testing the update, as the hotfix, testing it last week at the Hub City event, testing it with 2017.2.0 this week at Dallas. It sounded like this was working for teams pretty well. If you do see teams having a difficulty connecting still, intermittently restarting robot code from the driver station can sometimes resolve that. Again, let's see if I can get the dashboard open here. One of the things to look out for is what the value of the camera stream is in the dashboard, what the URL is. So we'll open up the dashboard. If you click on the variables tab of the dashboard, and it looks like the last time I was connected, I did not have or I guess because I'm not connected, I do not have the table here. But you would have a table here called Camera Publisher. There would be a value, for example, that might say Camera 1, and it'll have a URL. You might have to hover over it to see the whole thing. If you hover over the value, it would expand and show you the entire value. And what you're looking for there is, I would expect to see, with the 2017.2.0 update applied, I would expect to see two URLs there separated by a comma. The first one should be the name of the RoboRio, so it should be RoboRio their team number FRC.local, and the second one should be the IP. If the first one does show the correct name and they don't have a connection, and the IP one shows, for example, 127.0.0.1 or a 169.254 self-assigned address, those are the cases that my understanding is that restarting the robot code may help. If the team is in that situation and restarting robot code does help, you could work with the team to modify this. If they're set static, or if you're willing to set them static, you could go modify this VI. This one with the true case here, so this wire here is the one that has that 4 dot, the octet IP. So you could, take this and replace it with a string constant. So let's say I'm working with team 1, 2, 3, 4. We could replace this with 10.12.34.2. And that way they may be in a situation where they don't need to restart robot code. But keep in mind, if they then use this same computer to program RoboRio that's not set static, if they use the USB connection to connect into their RoboRio, if they use this computer to program a robot with a different team number, all of those would cause this USB camera stuff to not work if you make a change like this. So I would only do it if the team is really having difficulties. That's the only time I would pursue something like this. It sounds like the 17.2 update is working pretty well for most folks, and for those that aren't, that restarting robot code on occasion with a very intermittent symptoms may further help teams that are still seeing issues. So I think those are the two big things that I was hearing about this weekend. So if anybody else has questions or comments, I think we're going to do it again like we did last week, that you can type things out in the question. So there's a question about team laptops connecting to the RoboRio with the USB cable and it not creating the network connection. So first of all, let's just make sure everybody's on the same page. So if I go to Control Panel and I go to my network connections, so if I were to connect to RoboRio, I should see another connection appear here. I don't remember exactly how it shows up, but it definitely has National Instruments in here on Windows 7, so it's pretty obvious it's the RoboRio connection. So if you're not seeing that connection appear when you're plugging the RoboRio into the computer, there's a couple possibilities. One is that the driver is not present on the computer. It's possible for the team to uncheck the option that installs that and still have the driver station on the computer. If that was the case, what you could do is go into Programs, and you would need the update to point this at, but you could go down to National Instruments Software. Actually, let's see if we can do this just by running the update tool. I think I still have it on my desktop. Yeah. I think this will give us an option for repair. That may be the more straightforward way. So I believe the FRC utilities is what actually installs that driver. So if they had unchecked that, they may not have it. Interesting. I thought this would tell me it was like doing a repair or something, given that I already have this installed. But it looks like you could just rerun the installer for the update, or the 2017.2.0 update. You could run that even if they're not using a LabVIEW camera and see if that gets the driver installed. You could try a different USB port on the camera, or excuse me, on the laptop, to see if they just have an issue with that USB port. It's also possible that the USB port on the RoboRio is damaged, but if it works with another laptop, that's obviously not the case. Those are going to be the quick and dirty troubleshooting things without, you know, going in. The other possibility is plug the device in, go into Device Manager, see if you can find the device, see if uninstalling the driver and then unplugging the device, plugging it back in results in the driver getting reinstalled or something like that. That would be another possibility. There's just a comment here that most teams who had an issue with radio reboots had to do with loose power connection on the VRM. Yeah, radio reboots, a lot of times the barrel connector is a big culprit. The fuses on the PDP that power the VRM are a culprit. Could be Weidmuller connections, biting down on insulation or not properly, gripping the wire, things like that. There's a note here about docks. A team had a laptop in a dock, and Ethernet on the laptop was disabled while the computer was in the dock, so it was sort of an either-or situation that it sounds like they had. So I guess they probably ran into that because the team plugged the Ethernet into the laptop Ethernet port one time or something, and that's how they sort of discovered this, it sounds like. There's a note here about teams having trouble with getting their driver station to connect to the field and requiring static IP. If I'm recalling correctly, you're a CSA in New England, which if that's true, you definitely did have this problem. Indiana also would have seen this problem. So those are the fields that had a new model of the network switch in the station cabinet on each end of the field, which the code was not properly turning those ports off and back on again during pre-start. And so teams that connected prior to the match being pre-started would get an IP from the previous team, and because the port wasn't cycled the way it is on all of the other fields, then that would prevent them from getting the proper IP for their team number. And now you're pointing out that you were at the Arkansas event, so that I don't believe that that field would have had that issue, as far as I'm aware. So no, static IPs should not be required to connect to the field. This week there will be an FMS update for those districts that I mentioned that did have a problem. If you're seeing issues with teams getting DHCP addresses, that's something that we want to know about during the event. Brad is asking if connecting and disconnecting the Ethernet cable from the laptop would fix the incorrect address problem. It absolutely would, but once those districts update their FMS when they come online this week, the port on the network switch should be properly turned off and back on during the pre-start process. So we should be able to avoid having to have teams plug and unplug the Ethernet cable if they don't link. There is a question here about issues with the NavX with LabVIEW. So that's a good point that I don't think we've talked about yet. That's a good one that I forgot about. So there is, I'll say, a known issue. We know that the issue can happen. I don't think we've still been able to reliably reproduce it, or NI has been able to reliably reproduce it. There's an issue where teams can get their RoboRio into a state where it says that you get an error message similar to that says something to the effect of FPGA handle invalid, and it's got a minus like 60,000 something code. And the symptom that teams will normally notice is one or both of like their encoders not working or their PWM outputs not working if they're using PWM. So it sounds like this issue has been more frequent. I wouldn't say caused by, because we've seen it with teams not using the NavX, I believe. But it's more frequent with teams using the NavX board. And they should update to the latest version of the NavX software and firmware. If they're using this is a LabVIEW team problem that they'll run into. So they should update to the latest NavX libraries. They may need to reimage the RoboRio, or sometimes downloading like a brand new basic code project can get the RoboRio out of this state as well. But it sounds like the folks at Kawai had made some changes to the NavX library that seemed to resolve whatever was going on in the NavX library that was causing this more frequently. Conveniently, Scott is on the call here and mentioning that the NavX firmware update is not required, but the library update is the change that they made that seems to reduce the provoking of this being related to the NavX. We have seen at least a small number of reports of this for teams that weren't even using the NavX software. So in that case, loading the new project is a basic project, or reimaging the RoboRio when they get into this state is I believe all we're aware of that will pull it out of this state. NI is looking into it. It's obviously, if you do run into it, can be a very frustrating problem for teams and CSAs. But they're working on it. One thing that Greg did run into down at Hub City that he mentioned to me that definitively causes this, or very similar issues, is if you have this start communications VI here, and if a team, for example, has copied a bunch of code from one of the LabVIEW examples, including this start communications VI, if I have like another copy of this, floating around, you probably wouldn't have it in here, but if I have it in my teleop VI, for example, I have another copy of this. Oh, it's not going to let me do what I want. All right. Cut and paste. I have another copy floating around in here. Of course, it's not going to paste in there. There we go. If I have another copy floating around in here, or particularly bad is if I have it floating around in my test VI. Say I had something in here. Oh, I want to test my encoders. Of course, the encoder example would be a perfect way to test that. I copy paste all of it, including this start communication VI in here somewhere. That can cause some really weird behavior and a very similar error. I don't know if that's all of the instances, but I know Greg at NI is trying to chase down what this is and see if we can get some more reliable fixes for folks. But for right now, certainly if they're using the NavX, update to the latest NavX libraries, either reimaging or loading a basic code project are sort of your routes out of this state. So that's the summary of that issue. So here's a weird one, which I guess might happen in other languages as well. One of the CSAs that was at the China event said that a team using an English-Chinese localization pack, the driver station was adding extra spaces. So that's fun. It sounds like if they typed 5, 6, 7, 8 in here, there would be spaces inserted so that it became like something like this, and that 5, 6, and that didn't work, and then 5678-FRC did work. So there's a lot of different things. I don't know how many of you are aware of this. There's a lot of different things you can type in this box that the driver station will handle. Like I can do stuff like this. Oops. That'll work. I can do, if my team is set to static IP and I'm team 1, 2, 3, 4, I can do this. That'll work. I can do roborio-1234-FRC dot local, and I'm pretty sure that will work. I can do apparently just 1234-FRC, and it sounds like that works better on potentially some Chinese or Hebrew, and I don't know if you would see this with other localizations like French or things like that, but it sounds like on some Chinese and Hebrew machines that may help. If a team is using Java on the RoboRio, can they use the default LabVIEW dashboard? And if so, how does the camera drop-down selection populate? So if a team is using the camera server, the WPI-lib camera server, I won't say I'm 100% sure because I haven't tested this lately, but I'm pretty sure that you can use it with the default dashboard. That should work. It's publishing to the same table. You'll still see that camera publisher stuff show up here. This drop-down will appear with a camera selection, and they should be able to select it and have it appear here. But like LabVIEW has sort of some default code in there to open up cameras. C++ and Java don't have that, but you can use the WPI lib camera server class to open up the camera. And then once you do that, they should appear in that dropdown. Okay, there's a question here about spare parts. JB is now back in the office, so that's a good reminder. Let me make a note to talk to him about spare parts inventory so that you guys can check that when you're wrapping up the event and put that kind of information in your reports. But if you know that you have something that is short, or you went to go try and use something and found out that one or two of the ones that were in spare parts were bad or something like that, for now you can just send me an email and let me know, and I'll pass that on to JB in the Kiddo Parts team so that they can send something out to supplement what you have there if you have damaged or unreturned components. Anything else? Any other questions? Things folks want to talk about before we wrap up here? Oh, so this is a good point. One of the CSAs just mentioned the practice field access point setup instructions. So I did add those to the Schoology document section. They say 2015. The setup hasn't changed really since 2015. There is something at the very bottom of that document that says, like, make note, the practice field radios are D-Link Rev A's. They're obviously not D-Link Rev A's anymore. They're OM5P AN radios. But all of the access point setup that is in that document should still be correct for this season. The practice field radios themselves, yes, are programmed by the event radio tool. I don't think I have an installed version, so I think I'll have to open it in NetBeans, which will be a little bit slower. But there's a menu option to program practice field radios, and I can show real quick what that looks like. But if anybody else has other questions, they can feel free to throw those into chat as well, or into the question thing. There's a question here about troubleshooting if the driver station will not connect. So if the driver station doesn't connect, where's my driver station? There's a couple different things you can do. You want to check and make sure that the IP settings on the driver station computer and the IP settings on the RoboRio make sense to talk to each other. For example, both DHCP and have an assigned address, or both static. If you shift-click on this drop-down, it will show you all of the MDNS responses it has gotten, so it should show a RoboRio there if it's able to find it over MDNS. It not finding it over MDNS may be one of the issues if this is connecting in the pits with self-assigned IPs or something like that, or connecting in a DHCP scenario off of the field. If MDNS doesn't seem to be working, oops, it's not going to be in control panel. One thing you can do is try resetting the MDNS responder service. So we can go to services. This or rebooting the computer are things that can sometimes help that. Disabling network adapters that are not the ones that are connected to the RoboRio can help. Using the USB connection to pull up the RoboRio webpage to check that can help. I guess I'm assuming that this is in a non-field scenario. If the driver station is having connectivity issues with a robot on the field, there's a whole different sort of set of troubleshooting there that the FTA and FTAA should be trained on as well. So the NI MDNS responder service here, you can try restarting if you think all the IP settings should be correct to find things over MDNS and it's not. You can hit yes to tell it to go ahead and handle the other services it needs to restart. So those are some of the things I would try if the driver station doesn't work. You can also try the MDNS that the driver station uses is different than Windows name resolution. You could try pinging, RoboRio. I obviously don't have RoboRio here, but RoboRio 1234-frc.local. You can try, ping that. If the device is set static, you can try pinging the static IP of the device. Firewall is another thing that sometimes causes an issue. That's especially true if a given computer, for example, works wired and not wireless or something like that. A lot of times Windows decides to, it's got this home, public, and domain different settings here. It can decide to classify a network differently. Even reconnecting to the same network can sometimes result in that network being classified, moving from public to home or home to public or things like that, and that can cause firewall issues. I'm not really going to go any more into one particular scenario that sounds like something wasn't working. Those really are the troubleshooting steps that I would follow, and at that point, I would then be trying to differential diagnose, trying the spare parts classmate and seeing if there's something particular with this computer and diving more into the settings on that computer. There's a suggestion here that I'll read out, not endorsing or anything, but just a CSA found this helpful, so I'll share it. They said being connected over Skype with other CSAs and the FTA helped this particular individual communicate with those folks to make sure that issues were being relayed from the field to the CSAs and that the CSAs were well coordinated on who was addressing that issue. That seems like an interesting approach if you all have devices that are capable of doing that. So I don't have thoughts one way or the other, but worked for this individual, so just figured I'd share it in case other people are interested in trying that approach as well. All right. Anything else? Oh, I was opening up NetBeans to show the event radio kiosk on where you program radios. On this. This should be pretty quick. Sure. All right, so up here in the bridges menu, you have configure practice bridge 1, 2, 3, 4. So you click that. For all of your events, you pick this, field 1, click OK. I should really get rid of these other ones because there aren't really multiple practice field events anymore. That was for use at championship when we used to set things up that way. So that's how you, the FTA is, looking for somebody to help out with making sure the practice field radios are set up and they don't seem to be working right. Configure practice bridge 1 for one of them, configure practice bridge 2 for the second one, and that document on in the document section about configuring the practice field AP for the Linksys access point that's used on the practice field. There's a question about if there's a way to log into the OpenResh radios. Nope. SSH is disabled. The web page is disabled. We had to do that for the OM5P AC to comply with FCC requirements. And so the OM5PAN image has done the same for consistency purposes. Issues with imaging a RoboRio, how can one debug the issue? Before I jump to that, there's a question about the practice field radios. So there should be two radios that are practice field radios that go with the Linksys access point, and they're typically shipped around. No guarantees, but they left first in case 7 of the field electronics cases. So there should be two OM5PANs in that box with the Linksys access blue and black Linksys access point, not the field model. There's a different older Linksys access point used on the practice field. So those should be packaged together. You shouldn't have to use spare parts radios on the practice field. So there's a question about debugging RoboRio imaging issues. So my general quick list of a few things that you can try there if a team is having issues imaging the RoboRio. The first step is make sure you're imaging it over USB. That's generally substantially more reliable than trying to image over Ethernet. The second thing that you can try is you can try putting the RoboRio into safe mode by holding the reset button on the RoboRio. I believe it's for longer than 5 seconds, but you'll see the status light on the RoboRio. I believe it begins to flash, but you'll see a change in the status light that will indicate you're in safe mode. And you can try imaging that way. And if neither of those work, generally my next step is to try and see if I can do it with a different computer, a spare parts classmate, for example, if you're at an event, before I go too deep to try and figure out if I've got an issue with the RoboRio or an issue with the computer that I'm using to image the RoboRio. If a second computer also doesn't work, that's sort of the limits of the typical troubleshooting. There is a potential recovery process that the team could go through if they contact NI after the event. But unless you have an NI CSA that has the file to go through that recovery process, that may be, trying a separate computer, trying safe mode. Those are sort of the steps that you have available to you before I would be considering a spare parts RoboRio for the team for that event. Anything else? All right, well, thanks to all of you for joining the call tonight and making sure that you're as prepared as you can be for helping out teams heading into future weeks here. Good luck to everybody heading into week 3. And I did see this note about Schoology access. I'll reply to your email as soon as we get off the call here.